diving into the world of politics, policy, and purposeful change with Allen Alexandre. A powerhouse behind the scenes, Allen is a former senior political advisor who's influenced some of Canada's most impactful legislations. From banning conversion therapy to securing federal recognition for Emancipation Day, Allen's work is reshaping the nation's commitment to diversity and inclusion. Known for his strategic mind and unshakable drive, he has served in multiple high-stake roles, blending policy, passion, and precision. Let's uncover the journey of a man who brings change to the heart of the government and hear his insights on empowering the communities he's championed. Allen, welcome to the Beyond February podcast. Thank you so much for being here. How are you today?
I'm great. Happy to be here.
Good. Happy to see you. So, Allen, we're going to jump right in. You've been involved in a pivotal legislation. What's a moment you'll never forget from your time pushing for these changes?
Oh my God, there's quite a few of them.
Yeah, we'll talk about them.
So just a little bit of background here. So I worked on the Hill in Ottawa in the Prime Minister Trudeau's cabinet for a number of years, and throughout the time that I was there, one of the things that really fascinated me was the size of government, but also the possibilities and what you can achieve in government.
Right.
So I had the opportunity, and I was given the mandate to work on a number of initiatives touching Black communities in particular, and I had personal interest for working on those files. And but I still remember I was just about to leave the Hill. Like, I knew I'd been there for about 6 years. I knew I wanted to do something different. I'd learned a lot about the machinery of government, about the possibilities of government. And there had been this bill we'd been working on, and people had been talking about it for some time. And it's about the Emancipation Day.
Yes.
So quick background, I'm Haitian of origin, so born in Montreal, but my parents are Haitian. So there's a conception of Canadian history that is very different, from Haitian parents or French parents potentially coming into Quebec, like in the 1970s, and learning about Canadian history.
Right.
And the beauty of my time working in Ottawa was the fact that I was able to really find out so much more, and how rich and vast, profound, beautiful and diverse, the stories of Black Canadians are.
Yes.
And I remember meeting this lady. Her name is Rosemary Sedlier. So she is a firecracker, hardworking woman. Since 1995, had been working really hard to recognize Emancipation Day in Canada. And I had a chat with Senator Thomas Bernard from Nova Scotia, and we said there's something we can do about this. And the Ministry of Diversity and Inclusion had just been created, and we saw the perfect opportunity to do that. And I was director of parliamentary affairs. Okay. So my job was essentially push through legislation in parliament and motions legislations. Wow. And my greatest pleasure at the time when I was living in government was to be able to really write that piece of legislation that actually recognized that Emancipation Day in Canada is a real thing, and that the government fully acknowledges it. Good. And I don't think Black communities needed somebody to acknowledge it. Right. But I mean, there's been so much fighting happening for such a long time. I think there was a moment of relief to know that finally the Parliament of Canada was recognizing that not only Emancipation Day is worth of celebrating, that it did happen, but also slavery did exist here in Canada at some point. Yeah. And I think that to me was the greatest honor to have been the person who was able to really write that piece of legislation, that motion that passed in the House of Commons unanimously.
That is awesome. That is amazing. And what's something surprising about working behind the scenes in government that most people wouldn't expect?
Well, there's a couple of things. It's not glamour.
Of course. Right.
There's a lot of hours. The amount of hours that you put in versus what you get paid is almost like you're working lower than the minimum salary.
Wow.
But you go into these things and working in politics behind the scenes when nobody sees you. And you go into these things because you want to affect change.
Right.
And there's something that is driving you. The money is not a motivation, but you draw such a great satisfaction in knowing that you're really participating in changing people's lives. And that to me was the greatest thing. But yes, the main thing I would say that people wouldn't think is that whereas there's a little bit of influence, a little bit of power, there's no money. So anyone who's thinking about really earning a great life, and to be financially stable for the rest of their lives, if that's what you're looking to do, I do not recommend that you go in politics. That is very surprising. But the second thing that is very surprising as well was to realize, especially for Black communities and historically marginalized communities, whether that be women, LGBTQ2 plus, communities, indigenous communities, how much, government is everything. Politics is everything.
Of course.
So we may pretend that, I don't care about politics, but politics actually has such an impact on everybody's life.
Of course.
That unless you really go into the machinery of government and understand how decisions are made, you don't understand how your life and your everyday is actually getting impacted.
That's it. That's 100% true. Now, if you could describe the politics process in Canada as a TV show, what would that be and why?
I didn't see that one coming. I got to tell you.
I know.
I'm trying to think about a show. You probably watched a lot of political shows. There was like what's that movie again? Sorry, that series with Frank Underwood there. I'm just trying to blank here, but there. I'm trying to find a parallel between life as it happens in politics, and the perception that people actually have about politics. Right. But it's really a little bit of a soap opera. Like there is a lot of drama happening behind closed doors. So there is a job for the government to project calm, to project control of everything. But I would say most of the time, you get up, you go to work, and you go back home, you never know what the day's going to look like tomorrow. The days never look the same.
Okay.
And no matter how much you prepare, there's very little that's actually in your control. So I would actually look at that as being like some kind of a soap opera.
Yeah, sounds like soap opera. Yeah, it does. It definitely does.
It's really kind of the day in the life of someone
I like
kind
that.
of thing.
That's a good title.
That would be the title for me.
That's good. I like that. In this role, Allen, you've had to navigate sensitive topics. How do you find balance between personal beliefs and political obligations?
It's not always easy. And I'll tell you why. There's a number of reasons. The first one is that as much as you are doing what you're doing, a lot of it is actually not in your control, right? And I just mentioned that. And the fascinating thing, about working in politics is that you meet people from all walks of life, right? You have conversation with people that you think you would never have conversations with. You end up agreeing with people that you think you would never agree with. And you end up disagreeing with people that you would always agree with.
Right.
So there is some kind of beauty kind of in that aspect, just because you're being exposed to so many different points of view, so many different people. So when you go into that world, you need to actually have a center.
Of course.
You need to know that there's a core about you. There's a moral core that is non-negotiable. And then as much as you're willing to do things that are pragmatic in nature, because sometimes you have to agree with people that you don't agree. I think it's really important for you to really keep who you are. And it's not always an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
I've been confronted with so many different situations where I had to say things to people and trying to get people to agree on things that I know fundamentally shook them at the core. And then having to do that is not always an easy thing to do. But I think if you go in there, you do your work and you stay true to yourself, but you're also very pragmatic at the same time, because there's sometimes we can be a little bit idealistic about the thing that we want. But the world doesn't really move the way that we want it to move. And I think you need to find that balance between saying is this something that is really pulling me away from who I am as a person? Or is it something that I feel I can live with and that does not, undermine the integrity of my soul as an individual?
I understand that, right? So self-love and self-confidence plays a big role in that, is what you're saying.
Absolutely. And you need to actually have a moral center.
Of course.
You need to know who you are. You need to know where you're anchored, because you'd be called upon to work with people, make decisions that may not be what you would have wanted, but that are absolutely necessary.
Right.
Your job is to ask yourself, how much is that really pulling me away from who I am as a person?
Of course. That's interesting. Okay. So how did you first get into politics, and what was that aha moment that made you stay?
Well, there was never a moment that made me stay.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I think I could have been there forever.
Right.
But at the same time, I know it is basically just completely ballistic to think that you can actually do this forever. Some people manage to do it.
Hey,
I got to tell you.
That's why I asked. Exactly.
But the thing is, I got involved in politics. I think it was just like a natural evolution of who I am as a person. I come from a family where, politics is always talked about at the table.
Right.
Our parents were very adamant about us being involved, civically, volunteering with church, with organizations. And I remember the very first time I volunteered, I was like 14 years of age.
Wow.
And then from there on, I was able to witness the impact I was having on someone's life.
Wow.
And that got me, thinking like, how much more can I get involved? And the more I was getting involved, the more I was drawing a lot of satisfaction from knowing that I was actually having a little bit of impact around me, not anything large scale, but it gets to a point where you feel like, okay, I've actually had enough small impact. I want to do something a little bit bigger.
Of course.
So for me, my real foray into politics started in 2008. Justin Trudeau was running to become member of parliament for the riding of Papineau.
Yes.
And I remember I was in law school and I wanted to really do something, just to distract me from my books a little bit. And I got involved in this campaign. That was the very first time. And in 2013, he ran to become leader of the party. 2012, sorry. And then he became leader in 2013. I was able to really volunteer on that team to really help out, to mobilize, make phone calls, knocking on doors, organize volunteers, et cetera. And then in 2014, I got hired to go work at the headquarters of the party in Ottawa. Wow. So I moved to Ottawa and I worked there. And then in 2015, I became the national field organizer for the province of Quebec. And my job was essentially to mobilize the resources, train the teams that were going to be on the ground, and making the what needed to be done to win the elections. And I'm happy to say that, under my leadership and that of the team that I was working with, we went from a few seats to 40 seats in Quebec.
Wow.
In 2015.
Wow, that's amazing. Good for you. I love that. Yeah. What would be your dream initiative or policy to champion next if you had the complete freedom to decide?
Can I answer the question in the way that I wish you'd asked it?
Of course.
Okay. Okay, I'll tell you something. I would love to see some kind of a high-speed train that basically connects all parts of Canada.
Ooh, that would be great.
And you know why? Because one thing I realized in my time working, behind the scenes in politics was that we are a fairly fragmented country. Being from Quebec, being born here, having grown up here, but then after being exposed to realities of other provinces, but also just regions within the same provinces, the differences can be quite stark. And I think there's this lack of, there's the lack of a sense of Canadianness and unity that exists in the country that I personally think could actually be solved, or at least partly solved, with actually having, that high speed train that goes from one end of the country to the other. So that would be sort of my grand idea.
I love that idea.
I like dreaming a little bit big. I mean, it would cost a lot of money, trust me.
Of course it would.
And it'll probably lose an election because of that. But at least the job would have been done and the people would thank me 40 years later.
Of course.
So that would be my idea.
I would thank you. I can tell you that. My family and myself, we would definitely thank you. Now, Allen, you touched on this a little bit before, but politics can be very stressful, Allen. How do you recharge and stay motivated to keep pushing for change?
Small victories. And small victories kind of nurture you. They give you this sense that you're part of something.
Right.
They give you this feeling that you're making a difference. And I think, you can recharge your battery every time you have a little small victory. But I think it's also important to really stay connected to who you are, as a person, to never forget where you come from, but also to be a champion for those people that oftentimes don't have the voice or the access to affect change in their very own lives.
Right.
And I think for me, the idea of really, getting involved in politics and just civically engaged, just generally speaking, socially engaged, has always centered around that idea that I have an obligation to leave my community, to leave our society, to leave our country in a better place than I found it. So there's a sense of responsibility to our communities and to this nation to do things a little bit differently and to do your part whenever you're given something. Like they say, God never gives you something, a cross that you cannot carry.
Exactly.
And I've always felt that, listen, I've been fortunate enough, surrounded by enough love, from my family, friends, and people around me that have always given me the encouragement to go and push further. And I think that has really been the greatest joy in my life.
I love that. I love that you said small victories, because I think that sometimes we need to celebrate those and we have to embrace those, because we're always so focused on the bigger picture.
Exactly.
The small victories are the best thing, because it's like the stepping stone to the bigger picture, right?
And it nurtures you and it gives you that drive to keep going, and you can see the difference that you're making.
Exactly.
And every time you win a little something, you're like, oh, okay, I can go a little bit further.
Right.
So it's always a nice feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. So can you share a story of a difficult decision you had to make in your adversary roles, and how did you arrive to it?
There's certain things I cannot share.
Okay, that's fine. One that you can share, please.
I'm trying to process, what is the one thing I could share right now.
Yes.
So I was really in a position where, and I remember that was like in 2019. You may or may not recall that, there was an incident that happened with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau with blackface.
Oh, yes. Okay.
And I remember that really shaking the community to its core.
Yeah.
In the years that followed in 2021, after I left politics, I wrote a piece in the Toronto Star about that, and it's called Trudeau, George Floyd, and the emergence of Canadian Black identity. And the difficult decision for me to make was in 2019 when I found out, that blackface had happened.
Yeah.
And I was very much involved in the campaign, and I still remember to this day getting the call from the Quebec campaign director. Telling me, hey, where are you right now? I was like, well, I'm in Lac-Saint-Jean. He's like, okay. He's like, are you by yourself? And my answer was like, no. He's like, okay, well, if you're not, can you actually go into your room? And it was very ominous in the way that he was saying it.
Right.
You don't oftentimes get these types of calls.
Of course.
In an election, people call you all the time. So many things happen. But very rarely, and almost never, will someone call you saying, hey, listen, can you basically find a room and be by yourself for a moment? And he said to me, what you about to hear is going to be, it's going to disappoint you. But I'm really hoping that you can understand, and whatever your decision, however you feel about it, is completely justified. And he called me to let me know that, in 2 hours, his story was about to break. It was about to break on Justin Trudeau's, blackface situation. The difficult thing for me was to be in a position where I say, how do I reconcile myself as a black man working in the campaign? I was like one of the very few, black people, in campaigning and organizing for the party, and my love and appreciation for Justin Trudeau and the work that he had done. And my question to me was, what do you do?
Yes.
Do you basically, in a protest, do you protest and leave the campaign and say, I cannot condone this,
right,
and by staying on, I'm actually condoning it,
right?
Or do I say to myself, can I move beyond this? Is this much bigger than what you think? And I think I really wrestled with that decision for a few days, to be honest with you. And I finally decided that, no one is perfect. And Justin Trudeau had messed up. But I was also witness of the work that he had started within government and the genuineness with which he wanted to really advance the cause of Black communities. That was very hard for me to say, listen, I don't want to be part of that journey.
Of course.
And then you cannot forget, but you can forgive. And I think that forgiveness was also for myself.
100%, yes.
And I think I was able to forgive him.
Okay.
And thank God.
Yes.
Because the realizations, the accomplishments of Justin Trudeau, there's no prime minister in the history of this country that can actually compare it to his record. And thank God that's the decision I made. But I mean, that was one of those things that was very hard for me
Of course.
to do. But I'm very happy that I made the right decision and I basically stood by him.
Good. Hearing that in that moment, what were your sentiments internally? That
I felt betrayed.
Yeah. 100%. Of course, you're human, and you don't think something like that's going to happen, but you were warned 2 hours, but I'm sure the impact was grave,
For
For sure.
And then I knew I wasn't alone in that feeling. And I knew I was basically experiencing what, about 1 million other Canadians were experiencing in that moment. The feeling of disappointment was very real. But then again, my question was, I have this option, which is not perfect, and I have the other alternative, which is either to leave, just drop everything, say I don't want to be a part of this, or letting another government that I knew actually had no record on doing anything for my community,
right?
Take power. And I think the decision to me was like, listen, okay, I'd rather deal with an imperfect person who is trying and genuinely cares than dealing with someone who doesn't care and actually has no record of caring about anything that I care about.
I got you. I understand that. And I like the answer too, What's one skill that's essential in your line of work that isn't obvious at first glance?
I think it's always obvious.
Do you?
Yeah. Well, there's something that is always to me, and I think it is the essential skill, and it is the ability to empathize. And I think we talk about empathy so many different ways.
Right.
But I mean, I think in politics in particular, empathy is just key, and the empathy is to tell yourself, okay, well, I may not be able to justify your behavior, but at least I can understand why you do it. Right?
Yes. Okay.
You're not excusing something.
Yes.
But you can explain it. And I think the fact that you can explain is that, okay, I can see where that decision was made. I can see why this happened. Putting yourself in that position, I think is really crucial. And I think, to me, is a skill that I think is really paramount in work in politics, but which I also think is really critical in everyday life.
Right. Allen, if you can go back and advise your younger self on entering government work, what would you say?
Do it again.
Really? Why is that?
Because when I started my journey as a 14-year-old, and getting civically engaged as a volunteer, getting out there and doing and grocery shopping for an old man who couldn't take care of himself, and then knowing the feeling of that he was experiencing, knowing, and the warmth that he felt, knowing that I was there with him, every day, and then seeing that taste for making a difference in one person's life sort of gradually evolve into making the difference into 3 people's lives, into 5 people's lives, and then into politics. And it's a very gratifying thing. And I also say that because I had the opportunity to work in a machine that was not designed for people who look like myself, that was not designed for women, for example.
Right.
That actually still has a lot of challenges within it. But to be able to really walk into that system and feel that, listen, you were able to push it just a little bit, but that little bit actually did help move the dial. It's a very beautiful thing. And I really would actually recommend to my younger self, to go back and do it again.
Love that.
No, and I'm an old man. I just
you're as old as you
I'm
feel.
not as much, but,
you're not an old man.
but yes, absolutely.
I love that. And how do you stay connected with the communities impacted by the policies you work on?
The good thing is, when I got involved in politics, I care about my country. I want to make a difference, and I felt I had the drive, the motivation, the self-discipline, and just the fire belly to really just draw to make a difference, right? And I think that's still very much within me. And when I, get involved in politics initially, I wasn't thinking that, I would actually have the pleasure and the opportunity to really work on things that would affect my own community as a Black man, and in the largest sense of the word. But seeing myself in there and having the joy of actually working in initiatives that really touched on Black communities actually brought me closer to my own community.
That's wonderful.
And I think when I left government in 2021 to come back to Montreal, I had no idea really what I wanted to do. I had just been offered a corporate job with the big salary in Toronto.
Okay.
And I was kind of debating whether am I coming back home to Montreal? Am I going to go to Toronto? And then finally, part of me kind of realized, dude, your work isn't done.
Right.
I mean, everything that you've learned, you've done, working in Ottawa in politics, there's so much more you could do.
Of course.
And then part of me kind of felt like, shoot, did I leave a little bit too early?
I'm not done.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And then funny enough, I think that thinking got me on track to start actually what is now the Montreal Afro-Canadian Cultural Center.
Yes.
Which I founded in 2021.
Yes. And
it now represents the largest Black cultural infrastructure in the history of the country. Beautiful. It's going to be happening right downtown Montreal, something that was absolutely needed for a community. And I was able to do that as a private citizen. So I think the fact that I worked in politics and that I became so much more aware, because I could be both within the community, but also being within government. And I had to find the balance between being like a Black man in the system, but also serving my boss and really keeping the priorities of Canadians, on site.
Yes.
And then I think that really brought me a lot closer, to my Blackness as a person.
I love that.
It was just an incredible. And I think it was that feeling that really drove me to really, one day I just had a dream and I was like, okay, I think we could have a cultural center in Montreal. I feel this is something that wasn't achieved while I was in government. Why not just you don't know anything about these things. Why don't you just start something? And then that's how the whole thing started. And I think had it not been for that time that I spent working on files that really touched on our communities, I don't think today I would have been proudly be sitting in this chair and telling you the story of the Montreal Afro-Canadian Cultural Center.
Awesome. That's great. Do you have any surprising hobbies or interests that help you keep your mind sharp for your work?
Sports.
Okay. What sports?
So I did a bit of track and field when I was in high school. I played basketball, but was never very good at it.
I like your honesty, Allen. I do.
but you know what though? I got to tell you, my spin is still on point.
Okay.
Yeah, my dribbling is still pretty good.
There you go.
I know my chops aren't really as good as it used to be.
Okay.
I don't know if it's just age or lack of practice or I just suck at it. I don't know.
Oh my goodness.
But soccer in particular is a sport that I really, really enjoy.
Okay.
And I do a lot of biking.
Oh wow.
I also love kayaking, and anything that is speed, I love.
Okay.
Right? Being on a bike and just biking 400 kilometers in a day, or actually getting in a canoe, just out on the water, on the river somewhere in the lake. These things really do help clear my mind. So this proximity to nature and the feeling that the velocity of life. And that you feel like you're part of something that is so much bigger than you.
I love that.
But you still have a little bit of control on it. It's just a feeling. So I really enjoy doing that. And then when I don't have the opportunity to do any of this, I'm going to hit the gym, do some weights, for about 3-4 times a week for about a good 45 minutes. And that keeps me going.
I love that. I love that. Finally, what's one message or piece of advice you'd like to leave with aspiring change makers listening and watching today?
You have within you what it takes to make a difference. And all you need to do is basically take the time and search for it. And it's just a matter of time before you find it. And I know it may sound very esoterical and very philosophical in nature, but I do believe that, we each have the power to make a difference.
Of course.
Now, not everyone will grow up to become the next Prime Minister of Canada. And then not everyone is interested in becoming Prime Minister of Canada. But the good news is you don't have to be Prime Minister of Canada to make a difference, right?
Exactly.
You just got to look at yourself and ask yourself, why am I here?
Right.
Why do I exist? Do I exist as just someone who just wants to exist, or I live as someone who wants to thrive? And then oftentimes, at least for me, that sense of that, I would say like that clarity of purpose, that, the vision, to make society like, very different. It's something that I feel like has always been, within me, but I don't think it really just came like that. I think I exposed myself to situations that made it very clear and apparent to me that I had that in me. So get out there, like, volunteer, define like a local, like organization, make a difference, there's always people looking for help.
Of course.
Get out there, find whatever organization, whatever drives you. You'll always be surprised how much impact you're making in someone's life. And never, never, never underestimate the impact you're making in someone's life. They may not tell you, but ask yourself, if I wasn't doing that, what would be happening to that person? Exactly. And that is a fundamental question. And that's how you measure whether you're really making a difference, around you.
I love it. Thank you so much, Allen, for being here today. We appreciate you. It was awesome.
Thanks, Trish. No problem. Glad to be here. Thanks.
That was good.